Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the IRMSA session this morning, all around our CURA Software solution that we are hosting this morning. So thank you very much and welcome to everybody. And thank you for giving us your time. I think this is a critical initiative that IRMSA is driving to make sure that we create a platform. And so you'll say, so Chris, why are we doing this? Well, we have been inundated with requests from our members and non-members, by the way, in saying, well, can you tell us which is the best risk management information system out there? Which ones are you suggesting we should use? Now, of course, you know, we can never do that. That is not IRMSA's role. But what IRMSA's role is to make available to everybody out there that are parts of the risk profession to be able to have access and to be able to dial in and to be able to see and be shown what these software solutions can provide. And then on the back of that, so that you can execute your own decision, so that you can make your choice. So we've already had a couple, and today we are proud and honored to host CURA. CURA is a software solution, a leading provider of governance, risk, compliance, as well as risk-based software. So from that point of view, they have over 250 enterprise or global clients that they service, and it also offers a clear picture of risk across the organization. And why is that important? Well, if you get that, you get aggregation, you get integration, and that leads to a more effective and, more importantly, a more real-time risk management, resulting and contributing to better decision making. And you would know that that is what we talk about at IRMSA: integrating strategy, risk, resilience, becoming more real time so that we can impact proper decision making. Well, what can we expect today from CURA? CURA will onboard us, firstly, obviously telling us about CURA, the organization, just sharing some information around their business, but then a detailed demonstration of the software, of the platform. What can it do for us? And then, of course, what I think is really very important is to bring in a client, to bring in somebody so that we can have a discussion around what does this software do for them, and to get the client's perspective onto that. I am really proud and privileged to introduce the team. The team will be facilitated by Alex Roberts. He is the regional director at CURA. Warren Green, a longtime friend and colleague, global pre-sales executive at CURA. And then the client, which I'll again introduce a little bit later, Jonathan Leroux. He is the chief risk officer at Lucara, Botswana. Gentlemen, good morning. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for making this IRMSA initiative possible. So with that, I am going to hand over to you to start your session. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Chris. And to no further ado, we're going to hand over to Warren, who's going to cover the introduction of CURA as well as the initial demonstration.
Perfect. Thanks, Alex. Perfect. Thank you very much. So just a little bit about CURA. So CURA was founded in 2001. We're an established player in the governance, risk and compliance space. So that's all we focus on. So what that means is obviously our staff are very knowledgeable in the GRC domain, and they understand the GRC domain very, very well. We currently have in excess of 70 employees across 4 regions. I'll get into those regions a little bit later. We've done in excess of 250 large enterprise implementations globally. We level 1 BEE, and then we obviously continuously receive industry validation, which I'll get onto in a moment. We work very well with strategic partners from a number of perspectives, either from an advisory or a content perspective. And below is just some of the partners that we do work with, both locally and across the globe as well. So on this slide, you can basically see our business unit locations on the right-hand side. So obviously South Africa being one of our biggest offices. We then have Australia. Development happens out of India currently. And then we've got offices in the US as well. And then on the left-hand side, you can really see where we've implemented some of our solutions across the globe. Now, one of the benefits of CURA is highly configurable. And I use the word configurable rather than customizable, because we see there's a big difference between the two. So by configurable means all of our clients are on the same base code, and the tool is being built in such a way that we can quickly change it and amend it to follow a client's framework or client's process. Versus customizable, where each client is sitting with their own custom code, where we then have to release enhancements and support back specific for those clients. So we are extremely configurable. And the other benefit of configurability, what that means is as your process matures within the organization, the tool can mature and keep up with that process. So saying that, if you do not have a process or framework in place, we do have a number of best practice processes or frameworks that we can offer. And this is just an example of some of the products that we do have template solutions for, and you could potentially use that as a base and grow off those solutions. As mentioned, we continuously receive industry validation. So we've won numerous IRMSA awards. We've won Value GRC 2020 awards out of the US. And then we've also won some TT100 awards. And these TT100 awards are really feather in our cap, because this is not GRC or risk management software. It's just software in general. And last year we managed to be an overall winner with regards to TT100. Then the last slide I want to focus on is some of our differentiating factors. So we are fully integrated GRC solution platform, providing a single source of the truth. And we don't just talk about it. I'm actually going to show you that in action and how we view that information. We got a unique user interface, creating different user experiences for the different types and roles of users. We can easily aggregate information. We offer bow tie analysis built into the tool, mind maps, surveys, etc. As mentioned earlier, we're highly configurable and reconfigurable. We can implement very, very rapidly. We can support multiple frameworks, and these frameworks can seamlessly integrate to one another. And like mentioned, we've also got standard best practice templates we do have on offer. The system is very, very capable, so we are able to respond to new industry developments very, very rapidly. You can methodically develop mitigation strategies, identify and measure all major risk and all that information feeding into that risk. And then some of the other benefits, we priced in rands. We are tried and tested solution with more than 20 years of GRC experience. We're multiple award winning. And then we obviously also offer local support and local implementation. And that is it from a CURA presentation. The next thing I will be doing is jumping into the software and giving you a live demo of the software in action. Okay, so currently what you're seeing here is this is CURA's landing page. I've obviously logged in as a GRC manager. You can see it's web enabled, so it runs through a browser. One of the benefits of that is auto sizes on any mobile device. So if you're using it on a tablet or an iPad or a smartphone, it will auto size, so you don't need any additional applications. And then we've also spent a lot of time focusing on the end user experience. So what you see here is what we refer to as a zone or landing page. Like I mentioned, logged on as GRC manager. So I've got access to various areas of GRC, such as risk management, legal and regulatory compliance, audit management. If I scroll down, I've got access to things like business continuity management, incident management, and then my various areas of reporting. But if I was to log on, let's say, as a risk manager, I may experience this as my landing page, where we can embed things like videos, guiding the users on what we would like them to perform and what we need them to perform. Versus if I was, say, an auditor and I logged onto the system, this may be my experience. So depending on the role and the type of the user, we can create very, very different experiences. And really what it does is help the user to get to their area with as minimum amount of clicks as possible. So that's from what we refer to as a zones or landing page perspective. The next couple of areas I want to go through is just the shortcuts on the left-hand side. And I think it's important to put this into context. So the first area we have is what we refer to as solutions. Now, as mentioned, CURA is a complete GRC solution, so we can house any GRC related function. And as you can see here, we've got things like enterprise risk management, compliance, incident management. We may even have things like information security, ISO 27001 controls. So we can house multiple GRC solutions in one single platform. And the other benefit of it is these solutions seamlessly integrate to one another, and they seamlessly talk to one another, giving what we coin a single source of the truth in the industry. So that's from a solution perspective. The next area we have is what we refer to as domains. Now, this is how we basically structure your information. So we have what we call a domain hierarchy. And this can be broken down into regions, into business units, into departments, and it's unlimited in the amount of levels that it can go down to. So there are two benefits of using this domain structure. It's firstly permission-based. So if you belong to Australia, you will only see the information that is relevant to you at Australia's level. The other benefit of this is we're able to then aggregate this information up. And to show you what that would look like, I'm going to look from a group perspective, and I'm then going to look at how my information aggregates. I'm going to go to my aggregation register. And from a group risk register, here is my list of risks. And if we pick a risk, failure to deliver key projects on time, we can see that that risk has a defined financial impact of 9.1 million. But if we wanted to know what that 9.1 million was made up of, we can click on the little plus button, and we will then be able to see that that risk lives in various locations across our domain hierarchy. And immediately we can spot that France and Spain is our problem child with a defined financial impact of 8.5 million. So other than a permissions based domain structure where you only see the information that's relevant for you, we can also use this domain hierarchy to then aggregate the information up, giving us an overall view at any particular level within that domain structure or organizational hierarchy. The next areas we're going to go is the views, registers, and dashboards. But I'm going to jump into that in a moment because I'm actually going to show you how we create views and then how users can use that information to go and create their own self-service dashboards. So these are dashboards that require no technical skills. You as the end users can go and set up and create your own dashboards. But we'll get to that in a moment. The next area we have is reports. And these are your traditional printable type reports that typically form part of your various committees, such as your MANCOs and your EXCOs. We obviously look at you as an organization. We'll take your company CI and make these reports look exactly how you require these reports to look. And then you basically print these out. They are built in SSRS, which is SQL Server Reporting, which is a standard. So if you do have SQL Server in-house skills, you can go and design your own reports. This is just an example of a risk register type report. We have other types of reports, such as trending reports. So one of the other benefits of CURA is you don't have to go and redo the assessments. However often you perform your risk assessments, you just go and overwrite the existing data. We then have the ability to take snapshots, and we can then compare that information over different periods. So we can automatically see whether our risks are moving up, moving down, staying the same, etc. We also have things like risk per page reports. So these are our details. So for your top 5, your top 10 risks, you may want to print them out on a risk per page, where it'll give you all of the detail behind those risks on a single page. We also have things like action reports. So we are very, very strong in accountability. So we have the ability to assign responsible people at various levels within the organization and within the domain structure. We can also set up actions or tasks at those different levels. And we can then also send users emails notifying them that they are responsible. It will provide a link. They can click on that link. It will take them directly to that item. And then they can go and mark it complete, or if it's an action, an assignment of a user, they can go and perform whatever function they then need to perform. We then have the ability to notify and remind those action owners that the action is coming up for a due date. Should they not complete that action by a specific due date, we have the ability to escalate that item up to their manager. And this is just an example of an overdue task or action type report. Surveys. So we have full survey functionality built into the system. We typically use our surveys for things like our legal and regulatory compliance. Our content providers provide checklist questions where we can send those out to users. We also use this for things like policy management, where we can send out a survey to the organization. Have you read the policy? Do you understand the policy? So full built-in survey functionality. You could also use it for things like controlled self-assessments, whatever the case may be. Then we have a My Cards area. This is just over and above the zones or landing pages. This is just another area where users could come in and they could see any tasks that they've been assigned, any entities that they belong to, such as risks, controls, domains, any notifications that the system may have sent them, a little area for sticky notes where they can take notes, any workflow tasks that they've been assigned, so anything that they need to approve, any surveys that they've been sent, and then once again, any of the reports that they want to run, and then also the ability for any forms. And this is where we can capture things like incidents or whistleblowing items. So it's a form functionality that sits on the intranet, and then users can log items through the forms, and then CURA will route that through the relevant personnel. Then the rest of the shortcuts on the left-hand side, these are really just your admin type functions. So this is where you go and you set up your users, you set up your permissions, your zones, your landing pages, etc. So those are the shortcuts on the left-hand side. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into a risk register. And immediately you can see I'm at my group risk register. My risks are now displayed in a tile. I can see how many mitigations I have for those risks. These tiles are also colored based on the risk ratings. So we do have the flexibility to color those tiles based on various parameters that you define. One of the benefits of using this tile view is we can also use this tile view in workshop type environments. So we could bring this up in a room, and then we could go and we could sort by the various fields we have in our framework or in our specific solution. So in this example, I'm going to sort by inherent likelihood, and immediately what you can see is it now sorts our risks in our various likelihood columns. So we could be sitting in a workshop and we could say to the team, okay, spillage of toxic chemicals. Is this a highly likely risk? And the consensus around the room is, no, you know what? It's actually unlikely. I can simply drag and drop that risk to the unlikely column, and now it will reassess the likelihood and change it from highly likely to unlikely. And we can then go, once we've done our likelihood, we could then move through to one of our other fields, for example, inherent reputational impact. And we could perform exactly the same. So great for workshop type environments. And we can simply drag and drop the risk to the relevant column, and it would then auto assess those items. But that is from a tile perspective. Okay. Users also have the ability, if they don't want to view their risks in a tile view, to switch this to a list view or an Excel type based view. So when they select list view, it will then display the risks in an Excel type view with our risks as rows and our various fields as columns. And we as users have the ability to choose which columns we would like to see and which order we would like to see those columns in as well. The user can then save those changes, and it will automatically sort those columns based on what the user has selected. We also have the ability to highlight information. So if I wanted to know, let's choose our inherent financial impact. So if we have an inherent financial impact that is greater than significant, make the background blue and the font green. The user can apply that filter. Immediately, it will highlight those risks based on our filter that we have applied. So that is just highlighting information. We also have the ability to filter information in and out. So I'm going to filter information, and let's choose the same. Our inherent financial impact is greater than significant, exclude all of the other information. And we can add multiple filters. I click apply, and it excludes all of the other information. I'm going to clear that filter. Okay. We also have the ability to export this to PDF, to import from Excel, or even export this to Excel. We then have the ability is once we've sliced and diced this information to actually go and save this as what we call a register view. Now I'm going to call this Warren's ERM view. Because once the user has sliced and diced his information, he has the ability to then share it with specific users or groups or with everything. But we then have the ability to go and create our own dashboard of this view that we have just sliced and diced. If I go to dashboards, I'm going to go and create my dashboard of the view I've just created. So I'll call this Warren's dashboard. And I will save it. I now need to go and choose what information I would like to see. So I can click on the plus button, and let's say we want to see a heat map first. I select heat map. I select my register view that I would like to be using, Warren's ERM view. These are the widgets that are available for the end users to create their own dashboards. I'm going to use a heat map. It then says, what do I want as the X and the Y axis? I will choose my likelihood and consequence. It will plot it on my system matrix, and then I can save it, and it will then add my heat map. These are interactive reports, so they do have drill-through capabilities. So if I wanted to know, well, how effective are these controls in these first couple of quadrants? I then go and add another widget. So let's call that our control effectiveness. I choose my register view again. This time, let's use a pie chart. Select my pie chart. Which column would I like? I want my control effectiveness, and then I can simply save those changes. I can stretch that out a little bit. As mentioned, I want to know how effective my controls are over here. I've got two that are totally ineffective. I want to get that detail around which two. Okay, they're sitting in this quadrant, But let's now go and get the detail. So I'm going to get the detail. I select my register view once again. And grid charts will bring me back my detail. I can choose which columns I want displayed in that detail. I'm just going to leave it as default for now and select save. It has now returned the detail. So once again, if we want to select those risks, we got 2 with totally ineffective controls. Which 2 are those? Aha, worker morale is one of them. And if we click on it, it will then take us directly to this risk. Now, as you can see, we're in the detail of the risk here. So this has a name, it has a description. We can implement infographics to guide the users on what they need to perform, how they need to perform it. But in this case, you can see we've got a very basic workflow behind this risk. We are very flexible, as mentioned, and highly configurable. So in this example, we're using a basic workflow, but I'm going to go into a little bit more detail now, and I'm going to show you a much more advanced risk workflow. But before I do, I'm going to go back to my dashboard. Now, if I'm happy as an end user, I may want to then keep this dashboard as my landing page. So I can simply copy that URL, put it as my zone. So the next time I log on as the GRC manager, that is now my landing page when I go back into the system. So that's from a dashboarding perspective. I want to jump into a risk register now again, and we're going to use the risk we worked on earlier, failure to deliver key projects on time. So if I jump into that risk, you'll notice this risk has a very different workflow from the risk we saw earlier. So the only fixed area in CURA is this general tab with a name and a description. All these workflow step items you see afterwards is dependent on your framework and your process within the organization. So some of the nice things we can have little chat areas where if you want users to comment and chat around the risk, they can, but you choose whether to switch on or off this functionality. The risk identification tab, we can have things like memo boxes. We can have conditional drop-down boxes. So if we select environment in our category, our risk type will be environment-related risk types. Versus if I had to change that to financial, it would then have financial-related risk types. We can have things like checkboxes. We integrate into Active Directory. So to add a user or a responsible person to a risk or control, simply add and then drag and drop the user to the right-hand side. Assign the responsible role and whether that person should receive a notification. The system will send them an email notifying them that they are now responsible for the risk. It'll provide them with a link. If they click on the link, it'll bring them directly to this risk. Yeah. As mentioned, we can also embed infographics. So we can embed things like your impact scales, your likelihood scales, your processes, just to help guide users on what and how they need to perform things. Then on the risk measurement tab, in this example, we're linking to causes, we're linking to consequences. We don't only have to have drop-down lists and checkboxes, we could also have slider bars. When we have our drop-down boxes, we can also provide tooltips. So if a user has to hover over that question mark, it'll give them a high-level overview of what that field is for. We would mimic your framework and your rating scales, and we can either display the lookup names, the lookup values, the lookup colors, or either one of those. What we also have the ability to do is take trend points. So we can say, I would like to take a trend point now, And I can then go and compare my trend points for a specific field. So our inherent financial impact, if I want to look at the value trend, it can be displayed as a table, but we have the ability to switch that to a linear chart. And now I can see for that field, inherent financial impact, this is how it has actually changed over time at the different trend points that we've taken. We then go down to our mitigations, and we have exactly the same functionality. We can switch between tile view, between list view. We can group by information. We can filter information in and out. And if I click onto one of my controls, you will notice that that control has its own workflow associated to it. So once again, the only fixed area is this general with the name and the description. And then we could have our various mitigation details on those controls, such as control owner, various control types, and various classifications of controls. Whatever fields you have on your control, we will configure the solution to cater for it. But if you look a little bit down here, you can actually see audit findings. Now, what we've done is this is from our audit module. When a finding is captured, it is then captured directly against either my risk or my control. So now you can see our other solutions integrating into our risk management solution. And if I go up, we can capture mitigation actions. So once again, these will send out email reminders and escalations should the users not complete their actions by the due date. Then we have policies and procedures. Once again, this is linking to my policy solution within CURA. So here you can now see how this information starts feeding into one another. At any point in time, it's got this breadcrumb trail where we can see exactly where we are in the system. So if I go back to my risk, failure to deliver key projects on time, it will then open up my risk where I left off with my controls. Okay. In this example, we then rate our risk residually. We're rating a target risk rating. We also have the ability to embed things like tables. And tables can be used for workshopping type examples. That's just one use case. There are multiple use cases for tables. But in this example, we can see each user and how they rated each of those risk categories. And then it'll aggregate that up to an aggregated amount so that the risk owner can simply then go and assess each element accordingly. So that is from a risk measurement perspective. We then have a risk management tab. Here we're linking to things like key risk indicators. If I scroll down a little bit, we're linking to incidents. So incidents are logged via a form. They go through a full workflow process, and then we can link these incidents to our risks. On my business impact analysis tab, here I'm linking my business processes from business continuity to my risks. So we can seamlessly interlink this information, like I said, giving a single source of the truth. We also have the ability to, depending on what field we've selected, to open up more workflow items. So in this example, we're just using lines of defense as an example. If I select first line of defense, you'll notice how my workflow adds an additional item there. So here we've got the first line of defense, and we need to assess the information from a first line perspective. So not only can we build in conditional drop-downs, but we can also build in conditional workflows. Depending on what the users have selected, it may then go through a different workflow process. We also have electronic sign-off, so we're able to sign off items, and it'll user stamp it and date and time stamp that sign-off. So we're able to have electronic sign-off in the solution as well. Some of the other features we have here, we can obviously import from Excel. We can print this risk to PDF. We could apply ad hoc permissions. So if I was going away temporarily and giving Alex permissions, I can do that. We can send out notifications directly from here. We can do our trend points, which we've discussed already. But a very, very powerful feature is we're now able to mind map this. So at a click of a button, I can click on my risk and I can see all of my other different solutions that have had an impact or have a potential impact on this risk. So for example, I could click on incidents it'll show me then the 3 incidents that are linked to this risk. If I click on one of those incidents, I could drill down even deeper and see there's actually claims against that incident, versus clicking on my processes from a business continuity perspective. And I can obviously keep drilling down and getting additional detail. So this is once again what we refer to as single source of the truth, and the systems or solutions seamlessly integrating to one another. I'm going to go back to my risk. We have built-in bow tie. So the system comes with built-in bow tie, and you could then workshop certain of your risks. We have the ability to comment on that as well. But if I hide the comments and I drill into my risk a little bit, we've got our risk, failure to deliver key projects on time, with our causes and our consequences on either side of those as well. And if I click on any one of those, it'll then show me what barriers or controls are put in place to address those relevant causes and consequences. So built-in bow tie, standard with the tool. We then obviously have the ability to delete the risk, to schedule actions or tasks. If we want to move or copy the risk, we can. If we want to lock the risk and let no one work on it for a specific period or control, we can do that. We can encrypt the risk. So we do encrypt data from application server to database. But if you wanted to encrypt the front end of the risk, you have the ability to do that. And only certain people will have the ability then to decrypt that risk. And then obviously you can close it, save and close, and add the risk. So that is the process from a risk management perspective. The last area I want to go into, and we'll just touch on compliance briefly, and it'll just show you a slightly different workflow. So from a compliance perspective, we capture the acts, we capture all of the sections for the act. And if I jump into that, you'll notice it has a name, it has a description. We then have a details tab, and this is where our content provider, Eclipse New Law, provide us with content, such as things like the regulatory requirements, the clause or section heading, the plain language, and then any related checklist questions, as well as any guidance notes. Now, one of the benefits of this is we integrate directly into Eclipse New Law's database. So anytime there's a change to a particular section of an act, it will have the date it was last modified. He will also give guidance on what you need to look out for, as well as the version date for that change. And if there is any change, what the system will do is it would then go look at who is the contact for this particular section, and it will send them an email notifying them that this item has changed, and this is what they then should be looking out for. And then obviously we would then plug into your risk rating framework, and however you perform your assessment, we would then configure this to mimic your framework or your process from a risk rating process. And then any other workflow items or tab items that you need on there, we can configure those accordingly. And that from a high level is an overview of CURA.
Excellent. Thank you, Warren. That was an awesome demo. I understand we're a little bit tight on time to go through the compliance side of things in full detail, but CURA will be running another one of these digital sessions in the coming months, where we can actually unpack some of the other solutions that CURA has on offer. As you saw in the PowerPoint, we are able to offer a number of different other modules, and obviously it would take quite a while to go through all of those. We also have been getting an extensive number of questions. I'm trying to answer as many of those as I possibly can. If I'm not able to answer them live on the session, what we'll do is we'll contact you after the session and answer your various questions that we have, and we'll also continue with some questions and answers after 11 o'clock, just to get through some of the last questions that are coming up on the system. The next component we'll be going through is I'm going to hand over to Chris just to introduce our next speaker. Over to you, Chris.
Yeah, thanks. Good morning, Alex.
Warren, yes, that was an excellent, very concise sharing of, yes, and you guys have gone a long way. You know, I'm trying to go back and, you know, think about the things that we've done, and so that's excellent. So thank you very much for that. I do, we are running polls. Please, people, participate in the polls. We have 180 odd registered people, so please participate in the poll. We are going to address these polls at the back end. Please use your Q&A function at the bottom. The chats are great, but use Q&A so that we make sure that Alex, Warren, of course, can get and answer all the questions that you have. As a matter of fact, CURA's got a whole team in the background responding to the questions. Now, not to waste too much time, just wanted to share with you, I made the comment earlier that I thought it was such a great addition to the session that we have the views of a client, of a user of the risk management information systems. So Jonathan, I'm going to introduce Jonathan just in a minute, but Jonathan and Alex are going to have a conversation around what are these practical issues that they are dealing with, and just to share some thoughts around what are the benefits, because I'm seeing, especially from the first survey, that 80%, around 80% of the people are saying we are using or intend using. So Jonathan's contribution to you will be marvelous. And then, of course, to the 20%, it'll even be better, because you will then be able to understand why would Lucara from Botswana, why would they have chosen to use a risk management information system? So Jonathan, welcome. Jonathan, I know you well, but that does not mean much for our audience. So welcome to Jonathan Leroux. Jonathan is the Chief Risk Officer at Lucara Botswana, a mining, in the mining industry. Jonathan has got so many years of experience in many facets of the GRC space. And I think that is important to mention, from internal audit to risk management to forensics. I don't know if we shared the platform at one of the ACFE conferences, but I at least saw you speak there, Jonathan. So business continuity management, so a whole host of experience, of applied understanding going forward. And of course, he's at that level where Jonathan can reflect both from the benefits at an operational space and also the challenges that you find when you get to the board or when you get to the executive committee and you have to fork out money, or, you know, those challenges that you face when they ask you questions about the value proposition of buying yet another software. So Jonathan, thank you very much for joining the team this morning. And I'm going to then hand over to yourself and Alex. And if you don't mind, I'll pop in a Q&A of my own, you know, because I'm keen on hearing the experience at a manager level. Jonathan, welcome and thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Brilliant. So thanks, Chris. Welcome, Jonathan, and thanks again for being part of our webinar and bringing your insight to the audience on what it's like to implement a software solution of this nature in an organization. So just to kick things off, can you give us an introduction around Lucara as a company?
Great, thanks. Thanks, Alex, I'll do that. So to give you a bit of background, Lucara Botswana is 100% owned by Lucara Diamond Corporation, a Canadian-based company that specializes in diamond mining and exploration. So, you know, we predominantly look at what we call our specials or special diamonds, which is a type 2A diamond. So anything 10.8 carat and above, that's the stuff you want to get. So I'll try and give you some bit more background as we go along. But just as a sidebar, about a year or two ago, we brought out one of the biggest diamonds in the world, a 1,758 carat diamond. So even though there is reference to the Cullinan diamond, which was found on the ground, this was one of the largest ones found through the technology that we use. So we pretty much regard it as a disruptor in the mining industry by the nature of the technology that we use. We also have a blockchain technology digital sales platform. And obviously, given the COVID experience last year, that has been a significant solution to the market. And obviously, we listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange, the NASDAQ, and as well as the Botswana Stock Exchange. So although it might sound like we're a small player in the greater scheme of things, we regard it as a positive disruptor to the industry.
Excellent. Thanks, Jonathan. That's fascinating to see that you know, a company is that innovative about the use of technology, and obviously it's leading to a significant amount of success with what you guys are able to achieve. So what was the previous system that you had in place, and what motivated you to go ahead with the changes, and what was the challenges that specifically you faced around that?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. So I think the key thing to understand from a mining perspective is that when a mine kind of project starts, it is exactly that. It's a project. So you kind of come into a place, there's a lease area that gets fenced off with initially, I suppose, just basic animal feldspan fence, and then you kind of start your exploration based on the geologists and their reports. And over a period of time, you hope that your geologists have done their job. So I think initially to understand that most mining projects start off exactly as that, and over a period of time, in terms of the capex investment, it then moves into a mature, fully fledged. Okay, now we're gonna put things down and move it forward. So I think it's important to understand that. So in Q2 2012 was when the Karori diamond mine in Botswana was officially kind of kickstarted, and the guys started to take out ore and rock from the earth. So from Q2 2012 till 2019, as the organization matured on the mining side and all the other side, you then get into a scenario that the mine technically is now 7 years old. And as you know, as organizations and businesses, you now mature. You mature as an organization, you do things probably either on a napkin or on a glorified Excel. And I think that's probably works well in the initial stages of on any organization. So got to 2018, 2019, and it was okay, well, we need now to move this over to more of a kind of beyond Excel and to a more fully fledged approach. So there are some of the challenges listed here on the slide. And I think the biggest one was really that we have about 13, 14 different divisions or departments on the mine. So although we look at the core ones being process and mining as the key ones, but then you got other ones, you got the mineral resource manager, you got finance, HR, security, procurement, etc. So you kind of had individual views of risks, and when it came to kind of viewing them all collectively, everyone's obviously sharing Excel spreadsheets, and I think the actual interrogation of the data then potentially became problematic. So I think that was really the key thing, and also the culture around risk. As you start off early, you focus on the core aspects of the business, and now you start getting closer to the board, and they're looking for a better view around risk. So I think all of those became key things for us. So we were very much at that stage looking more into the operations and not necessarily as actively externally. And also forward looking. So it was a combination of these things started coming into play. And so the consideration around saying, well, hang on, how do we move forward became a kind of a question being asked of our executives and the board. So that was kind of the start around about 2018, 2019. So I hope that answers the question, Alex.
Sure, that does give us quite a bit of insight. So I think we've covered a little bit of the next two slides. So just any other specific components that motivated you to move over to a software solution that you'd perhaps like to touch on?
Yeah, so I think the key thing at the board level, 2018, 2019, there was a big focus around, how do we manage risk better in a more organized way, more aggregated, so we can very quickly look at what our operational risks are and what our strategic risks, and then be able to toggle between the two. So that became a big driver. So we went through a process where we formalized the enterprise risk management framework and policy. So that was really, really positive. And I think what was initially missing in that project was, okay, we can do all of this. We can have a real great policy and procedure and and a framework, but how do we plug this into a system? So that became a key thing for me to say to the guys, listen, yeah, it's all good having this policy, but unless we have a system that now kind of works and pulls this together, that's, that could help us, putting onto Excel, we're kind of going backwards. So at that point, we kind of already started to pull in the system side of the actual consideration. I think that was a critical part. Otherwise, we got a great policy and a framework, but it was left in almost in cyber. So those became the key things for us. And then under the kind of the bullet points, I think the big thing for us was, in terms of the project in the mind, how do we start the process, and also understand that we weren't looking for a Rolls Royce or a Lamborghini. Yeah, we wanted to get the basis, the foundation settled, and once they were settled, as long as that covered 80% of what we needed, especially in the first couple of kind of year or two, we can then look to other things as we go along. So it wasn't, sometimes if you're buying a vehicle because of the sunroof, that's not necessarily the best decision. So you want to make sure that it's a high performance vehicle, and the rest really is a bonus if you want to use a sunroof or not. So I think for us it was around really, how do we ensure we cover 80% of our needs? And then is it scalable? So can we, over the next 2-3 years, if we are looking for other things, are those tools or additional software or plugins available? So I think those were the key things for us. And obviously around ensuring that the team that we got, whoever the software provider was, that we had that regular kind of what I refer to as stage gating. As we went along, we kind of stopped, kicked the tires, and then we moved on. We didn't kind of just go 12 months and then realize, okay, no, this is not really what we wanted. So I think that stage gating was critical considerations for us.
Okay, excellent. That's a very useful insight. So tell us a little bit more about the customer experience that you went through as part of this journey that you went on.
Yeah, so I think, there's a nice definition there that I put up around customer experience, and I'm sure all of you on the call are aware of that. But I think the key thing for me is around, often when you have kind of a need to look at a solution or software, it's also around important to understand the relationships and the dynamics of the team you engage with. And obviously, Alex, I've engaged with yourself and Warren and a lot of the guys in the CURA space. And I'm sure when they see emails from me, they think, oh no, it's Jonathan again, or the guys from LCARA. But I think the key thing is that you almost, in this project, around understanding this is not a bring guys in and they do their stuff for 3 months and then they go. You develop a good relationship, almost like a kind of a family in terms of this, because this is not just I'm going to buy a t-shirt today and then if I don't like it, I can return it tomorrow. So the investment from both yourselves as CURA and obviously ourselves as LCARA is critically important. So for me, I think that was really key, that there was an ongoing, continuation around. There wasn't just all nice little bells and whistles and we'll do this and we'll leave again. It was around, okay, we're starting this journey, and we all kind of know that with any implementation of any risk management program, you're looking at probably a minimum 18 to 24 months to embed things. And that's just really getting the foundation right. So you kind of know at the start, for us, when we started this is, at least kind of a 3-year relationship around us getting the foundation right, understanding the tool, and kind of building upon that. So I think that was really important for us. So the customer experience between us and CURA was key, firstly for myself with you, and then also at the next layer in terms of my team, who are largely the administrators of the system on site, and then beyond that to what I refer to as the heads of department or compliance champions. So it goes not just from the CX side of it, the customer experience, but also the UX side of it, the user experience. So you kind of are toggling between all of those layers. So I think that to me was really important. And then also the continuous engagement with CURA was that I pulled you guys into a lot of sessions, which probably some companies would say, but that's not really kind of part of the mix. And I pulled you and Warren into business continuity forums and risk champion forums and other aspects, which typically you would say, well, that's not really kind of part of the process. And I think that's the difference, in that I think you got a better appreciation of the organization and where we're going, so that as we're looking ahead now with the underground project coming into play, giving us an extended mining license or useful life of mine till 2042, all of a sudden now this is not a a 3-year kind of solution. Like after 3 years, do we need CURA anymore? Hang on, we got to look around. How do we build this particular system that up until 2042, it moves from the current open pit mine to an underground mine? So suddenly there's different risk considerations to take into account. So I think that was critical for us. How do we develop that foundation, and then how do we move from there?
Okay, excellent. So I'm aware that we are a little bit tight on time, so hopefully a lot of the audience can stay on for a few more minutes just to get the last bit of your insight, Jonathan. I think it's a very fascinating topic that to hear exactly from your side of things, how it's all panned out. And one of the other couple of areas that I'd really like to know a little bit more about is on the change management side. So what process have you followed in order to ensure that there's a smooth adoption at a user level?
Yeah, so I think the critical part, I think, with all change management is that, I look at it as at 4 levels. So, people, process, data, and technology. And I think the easy one for us is finding the technology and the software solution. So I think that becomes easy, in terms of, okay, will it give us the information we require? So almost for us, choosing CURA was the easy part. And I think it's other, what I call moving parts, that I think are a little bit more challenging. And what I mean by that is, we've got to understand for our side is what data are we wanting to pull into that? And do we have a full understanding of what that data actually is? And do we have the right people on board? That's really critical, because it's pretty much garbage in, garbage out. So if we can have the best system in the world, but if we are not fully aware of the quality of the data we want or what's going in there, then what we're going to spit out is not going to be of any value to us. And then around establishing a very key process. So, in terms of what I refer to as our heads of department or managers of areas, or we refer to as well as chain of custody owners or COCOs and risk champions, they need to be aware of, this is not just, we only plug this in once a year and then we might require some data at a point in time. So this is a continuous process for us. So for me, I engage with the risk champions on a regular basis, the HODs, the COCOs all the time. So, and it's kind of a reiteration that, let's get the foundation right, get the report out. Okay, now let's look at your likelihood and impact. Is that not accurate? Are your controls preventative or detective? In terms of your mitigating actions, have you listed it properly? In terms of your status percentage, is it up to date or isn't it? So it's a continuous process of looking at all of that, and also understanding that you've got to pop the hood in terms of the engine and say, hang on, is our methodology still working like it should, or does it need to change? So it's a continuous improvement cycle, and then ultimately it's around the people side of it, and that, if the users at their level in terms of producing the risk registers, if they don't have an appreciation of the software and the reports, then they regard this as actually, this is just a pain in my existence. So there's a strong continuous process for me. So for me, I literally every month I spend at least 15-30 minutes with each of the risk champions at a high level saying, your risk register looks fine, what about these areas? I think this doesn't look right, go and check this. And then obviously on a quarterly basis, because of our submission to the board, I sit with the managers and the risk champions, and I go through the risk register in detail. And then we go through 2 or 3 reiterations before it hits the board. So there's this continuous refinement, and that enables us to look on a forward-looking basis. And I think that becomes really, really critical in terms of this process. So these 4 for me are interchangeable, and it's a continuous cycle. It doesn't stop because the fact that you've now procured CURA, it's now done. To me, that's the easy part. And it's really around going back to CURA and saying, we've got the following, additional improvements we would like to think about. What can you do? So it's really around coming back, refining reports, double checking the data. Is the quality right? Are you getting the right insight to make the right decisions? And then the process and the people for me is continuous.
Excellent. Thanks, Jonathan. That's critical components that need to be considered. So just to close things off, are there any specific tips and tricks or any final last thoughts you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I think the key thing, I think around this whole process is to understand that ultimately, if you got executive board and executive management buy-in, I think that goes a long way. Otherwise, I think you're just going to have huge resistance. So I think that's important. And I think ultimately is to understand that risk management is not something that you do and it's done. It's, you know, if you're in the risk management space, all on the call, I think we all know that every day is a new day, and what happened yesterday doesn't necessarily mean that today's going to be better or even worse, but it just means that every day your environment's continually changing. So it's the same thing with the software tool and what we're doing. It's a continuous, refinement of, does this work? What are you looking at? What's our current environmental threats? I mean, if anything, COVID has taught us is that whatever thoughts you had around a straight line, I think that's no longer the place. And your world and your reality is changing all the time. So I think to me, it's about being agile and being adaptive. And I think the CURA software allows us to do that in terms of the ability, as Warren said, about being configurable. But I think the key thing is if you sitting behind the other side in the organization, if you're not fully aware of how agile you need to be and how responsive you need to be in this environment, I think then that becomes a bit of a showstopper. So I think you need to know what your business looks like, how it works, and then be able to come back to the software provider like CURA and say, this is where we're going. How can you guys help me get there? But the foundation's been set. But again, it's a partnership. You can't have the software operating on the side and you operating on another side. There has to be the symbiotic relationship. Otherwise, if it doesn't work, it's not necessarily because of the software. It's because your change management or your involvement has been limited. And it's continuous. And like my last point said there, I think you have to keep on keeping on, and you have to get connected to people. You've got to speak to them through all means possible, and not. I know we do a lot of the social distancing stuff, and we can't always be close to our team and our staff. But for me, fortunately, being on the mine site, for me, I can go to an office, I can chat to the guys and say, what about this and what about that? Not always possible, but I think you can do probably 80-90% on Zoom calls or Teams calls. But I think you have to try and get that face-to-face time. I think there's no ultimate substitute for that. Yeah, thanks, Alex.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jonathan. I think that's a really good insight from start to finish about the challenges you have as a business or had as a business, how we've, through implementing software, how that's added some value to you, and then obviously the different challenges to get this right. And I think that's one thing that often isn't considered in this whole process is, software like this isn't necessarily just switch on and plug and play. CURA and other tools out there, they have the ability to just provide a template and just give you software, but that's not necessarily going to solve the problem at the end of the day and help you on the journey in enabling an organization in enhancing its risk or GRC functions. It's about a continuous process of understanding nuances from people, technology, all of the other facets that go into changing the way people work and changing the way that people understand data, access data, receive notifications, become aware of what is applicable to them. And it's not just software at the end of the day. So it's good to hear that from a customer's perspective, and obviously from a CURA perspective, we try and strive to ensure that we can provide as much assistance in that process as possible, and provide a human interface to that whole engagement as well. And obviously with the whole COVID thing, that's a little bit harder to do in person, but virtually I think we're managing that fine if we look at the way all these types of sessions are taking place at the moment. So thank you again for your input. I'm wondering if you could, Jonathan, I don't know how you are for time, if you could just perhaps stay on for a little bit longer. I've got quite a few questions that are coming through. We've answered most of them if I can. And I'm going to go through a few of them as we go. So I've answered most of them on the QA function. I'm going to read through some of the questions because I think I'm not sure if everyone's able to see all of those, and just to go through some of the insight that we can provide. But just to anyone that's, I see we still got a lot of participants still on the call. For anyone that's got a little bit of further information that require about CURA as a company, or a little bit more about the implementation that we've done at Lucara, we will be sharing a case study with all of those that have attended this webinar. So we've provided some documentation around that. And also there will be a recording available of this session that both ourselves and IRMSA will be sharing and publishing on our various channels. So anyone that missed the session would like to rewatch it or share it with their colleagues, they'll be able to do so at a later stage. So just to touch on some of the other questions that have come through, and let me just start from the beginning. All right, so different sizes of organizations that can use CURA. So that's a question that's come through. So what size organization is required? So just to give a bit of insight there. So we have clients that literally have 1 or 2 users, and we have clients that have tens of thousands of users. So CURA is a scalable solution in that sense where we can cater for the different needs, not only from a number of users or the size of the implementation, but also with regards to the complexity. And Warren touched on that a little bit earlier in the demonstration. And he showed that there is different levels of complexity that a solution can offer. It can be a very simple, lightweight risk implementation to a very complex one. And that same logic does apply to all the other solutions that we offer. So obviously today, the focus has been largely around risk. We touched a little bit on compliance, but we also offer other solutions that Warren had displayed a list of earlier. But to touch on that, business continuity, incident management, audit, internal audit. So we do have different scales of those types of solutions that we have available as well, and they can be sized and have complexity or less complexity based on the type of requirements you have. And what Jonathan mentioned earlier is one of the decision factors that he had for his organization when it came to selecting CURA, is they wanted a tool that can adapt over time. And again, that is one of the key components that CURA has, is it's able to add additional capability as we go over time. So organization can start off with a specific framework, either simple or with the specific logic. As there's a maturity change inside the organization, or as they have different requirements for assessing levels of data or different types of data, or integrating into other systems, we can add that on a later stage. It doesn't have to be all necessarily at once. And we actually, what we find with a lot of our clients is they'll start off with a risk or a risk and a compliance implementation, and then they'll add business continuity, as in the case of Lucara. They'll add incident management, they'll add audit, they'll add one of the other solutions at a later stage that then becomes relevant and complementary to their initial solution that they offer. There was a question around, does CURA cater for likelihood by impact by velocity? Absolutely. So yes, that's just another logic or another a framework that we would have inside of CURA. We actually call them methodology files. So based on the way that you want to assess your data, CURA will absolutely cater for that. We do have a number of templates that we have available. So if a customer wants to come on board and they want to adopt a predefined best practice for assessing risk, or any of the processes. So for example, an ISO standard for business continuity, we can offer those as standard off-the-shelf templates that will get you up and running with the correct fields parameters, the various reports that are associated to them, and you can start off that implementation journey a lot quicker without having to take an existing framework that you might already have inside your organization and automate that. So we do have those levels of options when it comes to what capability you would like inside the software as you start. Then we had a question around libraries of data. So CURA does cater for libraries inside of the tool. You can use a repository of your risk and control information. So those are predefined libraries around the risks and controls that you might have inside of your solution. So you can then pull data from a library into what we call an assessment, where that data can then be rated and captured and put various tasks and controls in place. To also libraries of compliance content. So we have various providers, and depending on which region you actually reside, we have different providers that will put content into our system. So specifically around compliance content, so legislative content. So if there is a specific compliance legislation that you would require as an organization, we can populate that those libraries inside of CURA with the various acts and legislation that you can use to then build up your legal universe and your compliance risk management plans, and then assess that into CURA. Can CURA be integrated into other business systems? For example, KRIs, and yes, that is absolutely possible. So we do have KRI frameworks obviously available inside of CURA. That data can be populated from other systems through the use of APIs. We have a number of off-the-shelf APIs we can offer. CURA also uses a open API structure, so we can create new APIs. So if there are any specific business systems that you have in-house that you would like to connect to, we can create APIs that will pull and push data to those different business systems. There was questions around different report samples. So yes, we've got lots and lots of different report samples. Obviously today we're a little bit limited to time. So if you'd like to see different samples of our reports, please contact us and we'll take you through a demonstration of a lot of our different report samples, as well as our different templates that we have available to clients. There was a question around linking mitigating actions to root causes. You know, is that possible inside CURA? Absolutely. I think Warren did touch on the more advanced framework, which did cover that, which allows you to create actions against root causes. And then you can obviously have the associated preventative rating against that. We can see that in a bow tie visualization as well. But then obviously we do have simpler frameworks where it's potentially just an inherent residual rating with your controls, your mitigations in the middle. So yeah, that would really just depend on what the customer's requirements were. Do we offer the ability to have timesheets and scheduling? Yes, we do. Inside of our audit module is predominantly where we use the timesheets and scheduling component. But yeah, we can, as it's flexible, we can do that inside all of the other solutions as well. So if there is a scheduling or a timesheet requirement, we can accommodate for that. Questions around business continuity management. Yeah, obviously short of time, so please contact our sales team. We'll go take you through a demo. But as I mentioned, we'd love to, we will be running another one of these digital marketplaces in a couple of months' time, where we will touch on some of the other modules that CURA has available. Do we have SLAs in place? So I think this is for a specific company, PureCo. So no, I don't think we do at the moment. But we do obviously, with all of our implementations, offer standard SLAs and support. So we don't just work with a company with regards to our implementation strategy, but then also once a company is live, we have a locally based South African support center. So any support requirements that are needed for our customers, they can email or phone our support center, and from there they can just get in touch with any of the support consultants that can help them through any issues that might have inside the software, as well as just any lightweight assistance that they might need. If they obviously require more in-depth assistance, then we offer training on an ongoing basis, and we also offer training as part of the initial implementation of the product. Can CURA cater for different risk methodologies as part of, you know, for example, project risk, as well as a slightly different framework such as corporate risk methodology inside of the one implementation? So that's a great question, and yes is the answer, and that's something that we often find is quite common, and there is obviously specific nuances to getting that right. So often there's a level of having strategic risk inside of a system, and then often there'll be operational risk, or there might be other risks in different sectors of the business that have different logics, project risk. And CURA can cater for all of those different ways of assessing risk inside of one implementation. Now, the key to getting that right is understanding where those different frameworks actually talk to each other. And if you want to understand what your consolidation of your risk is, or what your aggregation of your risk is, because often from an operational level, if there's a slightly different means for assessing risk, you might want those risks to pull up to a high level, strategic level inside of the organization. So when you're looking at your strategic risks, you might want to understand what operational risks or what risks aggregated might impact our strategic decision-making at the end of the day. And CURA can cater for that logic and that aggregation functionality. And again, happy to demonstrate that to anyone that that would like to see it, and just please feel free to contact us and we'll take you through that. Estimated costs based on the approach. Yeah, that's obviously really how long is a piece of string. As I mentioned, we can have 1 or 2 users up to tens of thousands of users. So obviously, when we're getting into the really large scale implementations, it can be a bit of a costly exercise, but generally it will be a large organization that has a number of users or many people in their team that would then derive the value from that spend on that software. On our smaller implementations, we do have what we call our SaaS, or our lightweight options. So if you only have 1 or 2 users that are using the product or have the requirement to use the product, we do have a month-to-month pricing model that will allow people to get into the power of CURA without breaking the budget. So again, please contact us and we'll understand what your specific requirements are, and we'll take you through that. How flexible is CURA in terms of integrating with other platforms which provide dynamic reporting? So interesting question. So obviously we do have dynamic reporting inside CURA. That's the report specifically that Warren wrote in front of you. And you can see that you didn't require any technical skills to be able to write that report. So an end user could just literally do that. That also being said, we do integrate into other reporting platforms. So a lot of customers have common reporting platforms, things like Power BI that they use, that they get value from as a centralized reporting tool. And we do have APIs specifically for Power BI and other reporting tools that will allow us to give a consolidated reporting data to our clients. Is there flexibility to assessing backend database functionality? Yes. So SQL's built in, CURA is built on a SQL database. So you can run SQL scripts, SQL queries with regards to accessing the backend data. But specifically with regards to bespoke GRC views, so CURA has what we call our zones as well as our views capability. So if there are specific areas of your data that you want to look at or have a specific lens on, we're able to do that either through that functionality as well as dashboards. So we can have a dashboard that will focus on specific data or give you a lens to the specific data that you would like to see inside of CURA. Does CURA cover our government colleagues? And yes, we do. So often we find that our public sector customers have a specific frameworks that they do like to follow that's a lot more aligned to Treasury standards. And yes, we have templates that are aligned to that. We have a significant number of public sector customers. In fact, CURA is about a 50-50 split with regards to private sector and the public sector. So we have extensive amount of experience in working with the public sector, as well as their specific reporting requirements, how they need to report to the PFMA, a lot of specific legislation that is applicable to them, and ways in which they need to report on risk. What skill sets do you recommend for risk champions and implementers of the software? So that there's obviously 2 questions there. I mean, maybe I could actually pose that first question to Jonathan. So, for a risk champion inside an organization, Jonathan, what sort of skill set would you recommend that person should have?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us at Lucara, our identified risk champions were people within that particular department that actually had intricate knowledge, IP of how that division works. So that was critical in terms of a risk particular skill set. Remember, those risk champions were exposed to our enterprise risk management framework and policy, and also they underwent CURA training. So there isn't necessarily a skill set required of it, except the fact that you got to have someone who you identify as a risk champion that are exceptionally knowledgeable around their department. So you can't have somebody who kind of came in there like last week and now they're going to become a risk champion, because those are the individuals that I rely on to say, well, if this are these your risks? If I look at your process, you know, is this considered? Is that considered? So I think it's more around the IP knowledge around the business is more important than necessarily the risk skill, because the risk skill is more around if they understand the framework you follow and understand the tool. When those two merge together, I mean, my role is to ensure that when they come together, they are considering all the aspects. That's why I suppose I'm there, is to ensure that, you know, I pick up anything that may fall through the crack, but it's not a specific requirement that they need to have the following risk skill. I think it's more around the business knowledge is probably more important.
Excellent. That's great insight. Thank you, Jonathan. And then just to close off with one more question, I'm cognizant of everyone's time today, and we have overrun a little bit to some extent. One last question that I'd just like to touch on: is CURA available in Europe, specifically in Germany? Yes. So we are a global company. We do have offices all around the world. In Europe, we have various partners that we work with, as well as a satellite office. So yeah, we are able to implement our software globally, and also with the common requirement these days that you don't necessarily have to have feet on ground to implement software. It obviously makes life a lot easier to implement in other countries. But predominantly the regional support that we have is our South African offices, largely does the support to our European and UK customers. We do have our Indian offices. We have a Malaysian presence as well at the moment, and our Australian offices, which is one of our larger offices. And then we also have a smaller office in the US. So we do have pretty much a global presence, and persons sitting in most of the more common time zones. So if there are various requirements that customers have, we can generally work with you in your specific time zone. So with that, I think we'll draw things to a close. And I'd like to thank everyone for your time. Jonathan, thank you so much for being part of the session with us and sharing your expert views. And thank you to the IRMSA team for allowing us the opportunity to demonstrate our product and to discuss that with your membership, and to all of those that have taken the time out of their morning to listen to us and to go through the presentation and our demonstration. Thank you again. We're very much appreciative of your time. Everyone's got valuable time, and we look forward to being in touch with you again shortly.